the Hitman, the excellence of execution, the best there is, the best there was, and the best that there ever will be. My favorite wrestler of all time, Bret the Hitman Hart. I'm John Renton with my review, Biography, WWE Legends on Bret the Hitman Hart. His work holds up now. It will continue to hold up. Space aliens will come down from whatever goddamn planet or whatever galaxy they come from and say, Bret Hart really was. Why they're doing a Zoidberg impression, I have no goddamn idea. And even if you're a short-time subscriber, you will have heard me praise Bret Hart's work to the heavens. While other wrestlers did get me into professional wrestling, my first wrestling show that I saw on TV was War to Sell the Score. I was over at a friend's house being babysat. I was hooked on wrestling. Bret Hart and a few others kept me in wrestling. When the cartoon aspect got a little bit ridiculous, I wanted to see people that seemed real, and Bret seemed so fucking real and grounded. The most grounded world champion in WWE pretty much since Bruno, if we're being perfectly honest. I mean, yes, there's Backlund, there's others, but Bret just felt like a real person, and his work, impeccable. His promos, while never the absolute best, his heel run in 97 was tremendous. He came across as genuine. The trials and tribulations and all the stuff he went through. There are a few things that I will skip over, like the Montreal Screwjob coverage, because that's been covered to death and to death and to death, and I talked about that when I reviewed the Shawn Michaels biography, and I'm going to be reviewing the Mick Foley and Randy Savage biography. Whew, but man, Bret Hart's work. I love watching Bret Hart's matches. TV matches, house show matches, pay-per-view matches. He fucking brought it every single goddamn time. Even in WCW, when they didn't know what the fuck to do with him, and Eric Bischoff just saying he had no fire, he had no passion, and you didn't know what the fuck you were doing with him either, Bischoff. He wasn't on this biography. I wonder why. Probably because he couldn't get it out, just couldn't get out of his own goddamn head and realize, oh yeah, Bret really was goddamn great and could have meant something, but nope, he just paid him a whole bunch of money to take him away from Vince and then do absolutely nothing with him for 2 years. Talk about that here in a bit. Bret talks about his, love of drawing. Ever since he was a little kid, he loved to draw cartoons. If he couldn't have the toys he wanted, he would draw them. He loved drawing wrestlers, Killer Kowalski, Waldo Von Erich, and the Zebra Kid, and others. His recounting of all the history and the stuff his dad went through was really goddamn good. It's a shame Dark Side of the Ring's on ice, because I would love to see, something on Stu Hart. Imagine how that would have gone. Bret wasn't a character. That just was him. Like, yes, the pink and black attack and the Sgt. Pepper jacket look and the Sting, Bret Hart comparisons as far as the jacket and the Scorpion Deathlock or the Sharpshooter. Really, really good stuff. Just, it's a shame their matches never actually really took off. Halloween Havoc 98 could have been so good. But man, what a rough time that was. And Bret on The Simpsons plays his old man stink. Oh, don't worry, sir. You have a charming musk. And the tragedy of losing family, health issues coming back and everything, and then that's all covered. We do the open. Growing up in a family of 12, being on the tail end of the younger side, or whatever. Obviously, Owen was the youngest. How his dad was born in 1915, and his dad got screwed over on a land deal, and Stu, along with other siblings, were living in the Saskatoon, in the Saskatoon wilderness, where the temperatures would get so goddamn low, the wind chill would get so low. They lived in a tent, lived in a shack. They basically came from nothing. That's why Stu would always hammer it into their heads. You eat all the food I give you. I'm not going to try to do a Stu impression, but eat all the food I give you, because you never know what you got till it's gone. Always appreciate what you have. And then the stories about him getting food ready for the kids, flipping the eggs or the pancakes or the bacon, and then scooping the cat litter because they had 12 cats, and then going back to flipping the eggs, and gross. I'm not surprised. Builds character, puts hair on your chest and other diseases in your body you probably don't want, but nevertheless, always take care of your cats. Always take care of your pets. Natty weighs in. Natty was all over. That makes sense. I mean, because Natty, pretty much one of the bridges between, her dad and, well, the only bridge between her dad and, Bret and stuff like that, as far as, familial relation. And Heath McCoy, who was not real McCoy. He did not run away to save his life. Didn't think you were going to get that reference, did you? He's a Stampede Wrestling historian. Other people weigh in as well. I didn't get all the talking heads on there. But Stu's formative years, gained into wrestling, being a tremendous amateur wrestler, carved out a Grant. Actually, you see that, not the footage, but you see the pictures. Because there wasn't a whole lot of footage of Stu from the 40s. But you see some, and I don't really know if there was any. You see that, and you just see how in shape he was, even in shape in the 50s. How he's in New York and got introduced to Helen. They totally glossed over the fact that Paul Bosch, future Houston wrestling promoter, at the time, I don't remember if he had been in a car accident and that was the end of his wrestling career, or if it was soon after that. I think it was shortly after that he got in a car accident, because he was a wrestler, he was in the service, and then that happened, and that's a whole nother story for another day. But they glossed over Paul Bosch introducing Stu and Helen. They were married in 1947 in a snowstorm, and one of the sisters, I think it was Allison, had said, yeah, she felt like she was, Helen felt like she was snowed in ever since. But the amount of kids they had, I mean, my God, Helen must have been freaking exhausted by the 6, and they had 12. 6 boys, 6 girls. The boys all got into wrestling in one form or another, and the girls married wrestlers. Buying the Calgary territory for about $50,000, I believe, at that time. Sometime in the 1950s. They had the Hart family house. I wish we could have gone in and seen the Hart family house. I don't remember what it is now. I think it's some kind of motel, not halfway house, but it's some kind of landmark. But I think it's like used to like help people out and stuff like that. But it's a historical landmark, and just 22 rooms, 22 fucking rooms. God, could you imagine if they had housekeeping? Good Lord, Helen probably would have gone insane trying to clean that thing by herself. And it was an old house for the Red Cross. They had a wrestling bear there. They would have fudgesicles. They would eat the ice cream. It would drip on their feet, and the bear would be in a cage under the porch and would lick their feet clean. Terrible Ted the Wrestling Bear. They would show WWE Storytime, the animated stuff and everything. WWE has to get that sweet, sweet programming that wasn't very fucking good. That Storytime stuff that was dire. That was not good. Drawing was like shit. It was like Camp WWE, which was abysmal. But back to Bret Hart. The Victoria Pavilion, where Calgary Stampede Wrestling was around for many, many years. It was only about 3,000 people, I think, that could have gone in there. 2,000 to 3,000 people. It was just bleachers on, in like a barn. It was just bleachers in like some old barn and everything. But I could only imagine what the atmosphere would have been like. I mean, I would have never been able to go there and appreciate it, because by the time Calgary was sold off, I was 3 years old. So even at 3 years old, I probably would have been like, I don't know what's going on. But I would have loved to have just been in there, just from a historical perspective, just sit there as a fan. Because what an atmosphere that must have fucking been. When people were really, really hot while it was super cold outside. Because Canada sure does have some bad winters up there because they're so goddamn far up north. But nevertheless, wrestlers like Gene Knitsky, Pat O'Connor, Lou Thez, Bruno, Killer Kowalski, various others came in, and there was just so much history in that place. Archie the Stomper goalie, talking about how he's going to chew the Hart house down brick by brick, and he was going to pile drive his mom and Stu on the interstate. He was going to do a whole bunch of stuff. And Archie shows him, because Helen was from New York. She wasn't Canadian. Oh, Archie, hands him that or whatever. And you just get flashbacks to, those were the days. You get back to that. And you could just picture Stu. You couldn't picture Stu necessarily sitting there at a piano, but you could picture Helen doing that. I love the footage of Stu and Helen talking about, just taking the calls and everything. And, like handing paychecks out to wrestlers when they would come to the house and just all that stuff. Really, really good shit. This is the kind of stuff that I enjoy seeing in these biographies, even though WWE will whitewash and revise history a whole bunch of times. But it's still really cool to see it, just how much history there is and how much cool stuff there is at home videos. They had Bret, of course, as a Bret, like being a drawer, an entrepreneurial filmmaker. The lizard video, the that kind of stuff. I mean, that I think was referred to in another one, but still, it was really, really nice just how you got to see Bret's home movies, find out about how he met Julie, that they met in 19 or somewhere around, in the early 80s, and they were married in 1982. The Dungeon of Screams, as many people call it, the Hart family dungeon. People would be up, having fun and everything, and you'd hear wrestlers, grown men, crying and screaming at Stu. Just love to torture and stretch him. You want to get in the business, pal? Hey, you want to get in the business? Let me show you something. Sorry, I can't do a very good Stu impression, but just stretching him. Billy Graham and others talked about, the amount of torture that people would go through. Natty recalls some of the stuff that she heard even as a kid. Even as Stu got into his, later years, he still loved doing the shit. Because he was just that much of a grassroots, just not even cruel. He just knew what the fuck to do, and he knew how to, instill in people the respect for wrestling. That's what he did with his kids. Bruce and Keith were in wrestling early. Wayne was a referee. Bret started as referee in 76, got into wrestling in 78. So if you think about it, really, he had a full-on career for, about 21 years. 21, almost 22 years. And then the sale in 1984, August 1984, where Stu said, okay, I'm going to sell it for $1 million because Vince wanted the TV rights and all that. Reneged on the deal. What? Vince reneging on deals and not paying people as he swallowed up territories? Say it ain't so. But anyway, Neidhart, Bret, Davey Boy, and Dynamite Kid, the known abuser, got jobs. And Bruce, Keith, there was a whole, story where the reason Vince, went back on the deal is because Bruce started up some variation of Stampede Wrestling. I think it was just Vince being, I guess, not an Indian giver. I guess that would be the wrong thing, but just, having your cake and eating it too. Giving him a pay, or, paying him off. But then just getting rid of the territory. To be perfectly honest, Helen wanted Stu to get out of the business anyway. Wanted him to go. And that was a way to sell it because Calgary by that point wasn't going to do as well coming up. Take a look at what happened in Dino Bravo, Dark Side of the Ring. Montreal wrestling wasn't going to do well, and it lasted only a couple years after Stampede. And then they were married for 20 years, him and Julie. The one thing I will say about Bret, and he's admitted this, is the various women that he went around with while he was on the road and everything. And if we're going to cancel wrestlers for doing that stuff, then we're going to have to cancel about 90% of the goddamn wrestlers in history and even now. Because that happens. Am I excusing it? No, but I'm just saying there are wrestlers that have done far worse things that have gotten away with that stuff, like Jimmy Snuka getting away with murder and various other things. His kids weigh in. Jade, who's a beauty, and others. The other kids weigh in a little bit later on. And he wished he could have been home more. It was late. It was in December of 1984 that he made his debut. Bruce weighs in. He just didn't have any personality. Because Bruce Pritchard, by the way, talking about this. Bruce wasn't even in the fucking territory at that point. Or in the company. He was in another territory. I don't think he would go there until sometime in late 87, early 88. Somewhere around there. But Bret didn't have any personality. Now, Vince did weigh in about a few things. And they wanted him to be a cowboy, and Bret says, well, I'm not a cowboy. I'm scared of horses, and where I'm from, you need to be a real cowboy, or otherwise you're not going to be looked at very positively. And he suggested the Hart Foundation. Jim Neidhart, who is a boisterous personality, had many years in wrestling, especially a pretty good run in Mid-South versus a heel, and then him and Butch Reed splitting and having a feud just before Neidhart left. They were having, they were not struggling a little bit, but they were trying to figure out what to do, but Jim Neidhart was much more outgoing. They made the Hart Foundation, team with Jimmy Hart, who looks exactly the same now. Apparently he drinks the blood of the innocent. That's apparently what's been in his megaphone this whole time. I kid, but Jimmy Hart, fucking goddamn hell, Jimmy Hart's goddamn great. Bret's style always was the steak, and the sizzle was Jim Neidhart, and then Jimmy Hart running around there being a prick and everything. Tag team title run. They skipped over the 88 split where they tried to make Bret a single and they weren't sure what to do with Neidhart. They put them back together soon afterwards because they realized, well, shit, we don't really know what to do with Jim. We know that Bret's good. They glossed over a whole bunch of other stuff. They glossed over, I think win the tag titles at SummerSlam 90 and having that match with, I believe, being the Nasty Boys. Demolition. They beat Demolition. They lost to the Nasty Boys at Mania 91. Speaking of 91, he had that match with Mr. Perfect. He was rising up in the ranks and everything. Mr. Perfect had a severe back injury, but always respected Bret. Put him over properly. Monsoon talked up Stu's, or Stu bringing up Bret and so many of the other kids because Monsoon, massive amount of respect from that man for professional wrestling. Great commentator, even if some of his stuff didn't make all that much sense. Bret always praised Monsoon, and Monsoon was just tremendous in a class by himself, and I miss Monsoon. God, that line from Bobby Heenan just really quickly when he was at the Hall of Fame in 2004 was the only one they missing. I wish Monsoon was here. It's like, ow, oh, I felt that. But the match with Mr. Perfect, Drew, Sheamus, Edge, and others weigh in about how, it was a great, iconic match. Intercontinental Championship win. They skipped over the Mania 8 match. They did go back to it a little bit, but they went right into SummerSlam 1992. The family dynamic facing off against the British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith, who Bret's sister Diana was married to, and there was a good family dynamic there. Other family members, Helen didn't want to see him fight. Diana didn't want to see him fight, and other kids, 1992 archival footage, which was really, really nice. This match stands out for a few reasons. I will be retro-viewing SummerSlam 92 sometime after this, but this still stands out to this day because Bret had talked about how Davey wasn't in great shape. Bret would always envision the match. He'd tan or he'd relax, and he'd envision the entire match. And it was the match that played out in the ring. But Davey had been up with Jim Neidhart, partying and everything, and doing drugs, and was in no shape to really do it. And Bret had to talk. And Bret Hart even said, that's one of the only matches where you see Bret Hart talking, because he had to call every spot. He had to do it, confidentially, but you could still see him talking because they had to go 25, 30 minutes, something like that, whatever it was. I don't remember the exact runtime, but it was a while. Now, Davey was a natural, and when he was straight, he was really fucking good. But Bret carried him off there. Davey was there for everything, but there were a few bad spots, like being crotch on the ropes and stuff like that. But Davey still beat him. 1, 2, 3 in the middle of the ring. Wembley Stadium went fucking nuts. Bulldog was over in his home country. Bret was over, because Bret was always respected by the international fans. Even by that point, he was really rising up in the international ranks. And then we go to him winning the world title at a house show, I believe in Saskatoon, October 12th, 1992, where he even talked about having to pop, I think it was his index finger. He had to pop one of his fingers back in. He had to do this. Yeah, I can't do the trick. Nevertheless, he ended up popping his finger back in. Even Mr. Perfect's like, ugh, because he was in Flair's corner. And then he won the world championship and was a respected world champion. Match with Shawn Michaels at Survivor Series 92 still holds up and was during better times. And then even that match with Razor Ramon at Royal Rumble 1993. So many great matches in Bret Hart's career. They glossed over Mania. Mania 9. I wonder why. He loses to Yokozuna. Okay, that's fine. He loses to Yoko. That's okay. A heel walking out as champion for the first time. But Hulk Hogan cashes in his Money in the Bank briefcase before Money in the Bank was ever even fucking thought of and beats Yokozuna. And does he put over Bret Hart at SummerSlam? No, he fucking doesn't, because Hulk Hogan didn't want to do business. That doesn't work for me, brother. And had Bret beaten Hogan there, it would have meant a whole lot more. But nope, Hogan didn't want to do that. Hogan talked in the Roddy Piper documentary about, Piper should have let Hogan beat him, and it would have actually made some sense. They could have made more money, drawn more money with that. But he didn't want to put over Bret. because Bret would have taken the shine off him. Even though Bret was all about business, he would have taken the fucking shine off him because Hulk Hogan was all about Terry. That's all he ever fucking was. I'm not saying that I don't understand it, protecting your spot, but there is some point where it's like, okay, let's do the time-honored tradition. But he didn't want to do that. Bret truly was one of the best to ever fucking do it. Yes, I'm biased. I don't really fucking care. That run of King of the Ring, Bam Bam Bigelow, Razor Ramon. Who the fuck else did he face? Perfect. He faced Perfect. God, I don't know why I forgot that one. That might have been the best of them. But he faced those three. Won the King of the Ring. The feud with Jerry Lawler was glossed over, which is probably smart, because while it certainly wasn't bad, and Lawler had some good lines, like talking about Helen and Stu, how about we talk about the fact when you were young, the Dead Sea was just sick, which always makes me laugh. And then, you know, his time overseas, the Bret Owen dynamic, and this is where things got really emotional. This is where I can truly appreciate Bret's love for wrestling and family. And the fact is, you know, it built from Survivor Series 93. I mean, it built up a bit before that because they were finally trying to figure out what to do with Owen, because Owen was going to quit and go be a fireman. In hindsight, could you have fucking imagined if he had left right after the Bret feud? He'd still be alive. Instead of Vince saying, first of all, I resent your tone. Couldn't just use the right goddamn, company. Nope, you couldn't fucking do that, Vince, you goddamn prick. But Owen, of course, being the only one eliminated Survivor Series 93, they smoothed things out. Builds and builds and builds. Royal Rumble 1994. Bret has a knee injury but won't tag in Owen. Won't tag him in. And eventually the match was called off. And Owen's upset, but it's like, okay, family, blood, that takes precedent. And then, of course, Owen kicks him in the knee and then says the iconic line that will forever be etched in my head. That's why I kicked your leg out of your leg. God, only Owen could pull that off. Only Owen could pull that off and make it to where he would not be mocked repeatedly. We say it with love and reverence because Owen was just that fucking good. Mania 10, best opening match in Mania history. My personal opinion. Bias or not, Daniel Bryan versus Triple H at Mania 30 is close. Miz, Balor, and Rollins at Mania 34 is pretty goddamn good. I still say Bret versus Owen because of the family dynamic and the fact that Owen won. We knew that Daniel Bryan was going to beat Triple H. Had a pretty good idea Rollins was going to beat win the Intercontinental Championship at Mania 34. And there are a few other opening matches that are pretty good. I don't think anybody expected Owen to beat Bret at that time. Now, maybe that's just 13-year-old me reflecting back on it, because that's how old I was at the time, but Owen beat Bret. That was a big fucking deal. Owen saying, I proved that I'm the best. The best there is, the best there was, the best there ever was, all this stuff that he proved. And then Bret had a second match. Lex Luger faced Yokozuna, and then Yokozuna had a second match that night. Faced off against Bret, and Bret beat Yokozuna. So he lost to his brother. His brother proved he was the best for a couple hours, and then Bret Hart beats Yokozuna, holds the championship up high. Everybody's celebrating, and Owen is just there. You son of a bitch, you did it again. I had my moment of glory. You took it away from me again. It's just so fucking... This feud with Owen still holds up as one of my favorite feuds of all time. It was one of the few really, really good feuds in the early to mid-90s that WWE did because it felt real, felt genuine. It felt like something that could have actually happened. Two brothers that love each other, but the younger brother's jealous of the older brother and thinking that the older brother's holding them down. It makes sense. It's simple. Personal issues draw money. And then he really does get emotional about the stuff like the SummerSlam 94 cage match, which is a lot better than I remember. Should have been the main event, but no, we had to have Undertaker versus Underfaker. Poor Leslie Nielsen having to revive his Frank Drebin character from Naked Gun just for that. And then Survivor Series 94, it's like, Mom, that's your son. Your son's in the ring. Help your son. Oh, it's just saying, throw the towel. That's good shit. That's my fucking goodness, that's great stuff. Owen God, I miss Owen. But Bret, got emotional about the Owen stuff, saying it just felt really genuine. Mark Henry weighed in, because Mark Henry's been open about Owen being in the Hall of Fame. Obviously, knowing what the company did, I'm not blaming any wrestlers. What the company did, Vince McMahon specifically, and how he handled that. No, Owen should not be in the WWE Hall of Fame, though he should be recognized. I don't blame Martha or the kids for feeling how they felt, and how they still feel. They have every fucking right to feel that way. And Bret was a real world champion. Carried himself like a world champion. He pretty much was the most real world champion since Bruno. Even though Backlund was legit, Backlund didn't have the dynamic personality really to elevate that. Bruno didn't need to have a dynamic personality. He just was Bruno. Bret was the modern Bruno. As far as, obviously he was never going to have as many sellouts as Bruno, and Bruno had that bodybuilder physique. Bret was in good shape, but Bret just struck me as a real world's champion, and his international fan base, the Lonesome Dove set, they glossed over everything in 93, 90. We talked a little bit about 94. They glossed over stuff in 95. Then again, the Backlund match probably was a good thing to gloss over. The win against Diesel at Survivor Series 1995, ending Diesel's near year-long reign that should have worked, but wasn't going to work because of how Vince decided to book him. They lost so much money. $6 million in 1995, pal. Well, yeah, Vince, you weren't very goddamn smart. His contract elapsed. In September of 96, his agent set up a meeting with Bret to talk to Bischoff, and Bret basically said he wanted to get Bischoff off his back, because Bischoff's like, what would it take to get him here? $3 million, or, match Hulk Hogan's money plus 1 penny. And then they came back with $2.8 million over 3 years, per year, plus royalties, which probably was going to amount to about $10 million in all honesty. The royalties, the pay-per-views, the merch, and that kind of stuff, probably going to amount to about $10 million. That's $9 million right there. Even if you have just a little bit of royalties, $300,000 spread out over 3 years, spread out over each of the 3 years, you're about $10 million, close to it. Vince offered 10 years, or 20 years, $10.5 million, few years as a wrestler, and then pay him as an ambassador and this kind of stuff. But then Vince suddenly reneges on the deal. This is after he was a bad guy in the U.S. and a good guy on the international market, and cutting the promos and everything, talking about, look at O.J. Simpson, you can tell the American justice system doesn't work. And the Mania 13 match against Steve Austin still fucking holds up. Just almost breaking out of that sharpshooter and getting goosebumps just thinking about it. And Bret holding on to it and then beating Austin down. The best double turn in history. And it was like falling in love with the shark from Jaws, is what Bret said. And then his heel run was tremendous. His feud with Shawn. They skipped over the Iron Man match, which I don't really understand. I wish they would have talked about that a little bit. But the Sunny Days promo and other things. Vince says, go go see if you can get an offer from WCW, because I can't pay this, or I don't want to pay this. You're not worth it. I'm losing money. And then he gave Mike Tyson a few $1 million a little bit later. The Screwjob's brought up. Bret would have not taken the title to WCW. Bischoff also would have been prevented from doing so because of the Diesel-Nash stuff. The Nash Hall stuff, rather. Diesel, because Nash was Diesel. And, you know who I am. It's like, but you don't know why I'm here and all that. So there were other things I think that led to a lawsuit. But he would have been prevented from doing so. Wrestling with Shadows. I still side with Bret. To this day. They could have dropped the title to a number of people. Bret had the reasonable creative control over the last at least 30 or 60 days of his contract, which Vince was an idiot for negotiating. And could have taken the title off him. Shouldn't even given it to him at SummerSlam 97 if he thought he couldn't work this thing out. But nope, it had to be Shawn. And then Shawn basically was a goddamn prick about it and has since cleaned up and found God. But the whole thing of Mania 14, all that stuff, it didn't really end up going much of anywhere. Vince shows absolutely no goddamn remorse for all this. Bret's WCW run should have gotten a whole bunch better. He should have been... I know that he couldn't have wrestled on Nitro. The next night, put him on there, you get 10 to 11 million people, and you put the stake through WWE's heart. All you had to fucking do. They had a live Nitro. Yes, there was a live Raw and everything, but Bret could have shown up, kicked the doors down, come out, worked that, and that, because he broke his knuckle punching Vince. Okay, he's got an injury. That's fine. Whatever. They should have fucking brought him on the next goddamn Nitro. Because from there, they didn't know what the fuck they were doing. He'd be a U.S. champion, didn't go anywhere. He was a world champion in 99. The death of Owen is brought up. I've talked about that at length. Really, really goddamn tragic. Totally preventable. Vince McMahon will burn in hell for what he did to Owen and continuing the show. But Bret talks about his various injuries. Talks about being, near the end of his career and everything, but they as a wrestler, Goldberg was a 0 out of 10 because he didn't understand that wrestling, was a work. Trying to make it real is one thing, but like, you're not supposed to really hit people with that much impact. He kicks them. There's a figure 4 spot, the kick and everything is talked about in the Goldberg thing. You can hear me talk about that there. There's more praising of Bret. And he suffers. He suffers through a lot of injuries and a lot of stuff, like splits from his wife Julie, but she's still around to help him because he suffers a debilitating stroke. It's right after Bulldog had passed away, Mr. Perfect had passed away a little bit earlier that year, various other people. He was in a wheelchair for 3 months. I didn't realize it was that bad. I knew that it was bad because he didn't make any appearances for a while. Then he appeared on the last WWA pay-per-view, which, boy, WWA, that was something. But he did help. He helped mend the fence. Because I believe Vince called him while he was in Traction and said, "You're a fighter," gave him a good pep talk and everything. They eased back. And Bret ended up going through a whole lot of stuff. He had that big bag of rocks that he talked about. He let it go. They skipped over his Hall of Fame induction in 2006. Then the piece with Shawn, Mania 26 match, his legacy, his life. He's got a family and everything. The New Hart family, New Hart household. And there you go. Bret has a new wife. His third wife, this seems like the one that'll stick, and good for them. So yeah, Bret, best there is, best there was, best there ever will be. His work still holds up. I could talk at length about Bret Hart. I could do this in 3 parts. I did a 3-part series on Bret Hart's run in WCW, going over all the matches and everything. But Bret's work will always hold up to me. And yeah, I love Bret Hart. If I could have ever met Bret Hart, I would have been so goddamn happy. But Bret Hart, the best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.